There's a very significant concept in Judaism, and that is called, in Hebrew, Genevat Da'at, literally theft, stealing knowledge. What does that mean? It means what we would refer to as deception. Judaism is very adamant that a person is not permitted to lie, except in rare circumstances where sometimes it's essential to save a life and things of that sort. But on the whole, even small lies are to be avoided. And you're not permitted to engage in any kind of deception. So, for example, a butcher who sells kosher meat to Jews, of course. But let's say that sometimes there might be a Gentile who's permitted to eat non-kosher meat, but for whatever reason, he only wants to eat kosher meat. He's convinced that this is better for him. So he comes to the Jewish butcher to buy meat. Now, sometimes the Jewish butcher may have, inadvertently, whatever the case may be, he has some non-kosher meat, and he has to get rid of it. Now, he can't sell it to Jews, because they're not permitted to eat it. But can he sell it to this Gentile, who's permitted to eat it, but himself only wants to eat kosher? Well, he wouldn't know the difference. What harm would it be? The answer is he's not allowed to engage in deception. If he tells the Gentile, okay, if he wants it, fine. But if he doesn't tell him and passes it off as though it were kosher, that is a violation of this category of deception. And there may be other cases. I mean, sometimes you make a party and you can only invite, or a bar mitzvah, a wedding, you can only invite a certain amount of people, and you have to cut. You have to decide who's not going to be invited. So you decided that you're not going to invite this person or this couple. Then you find out that at the time of the wedding, they're going to be in Europe at that time anyways. Oh, so now I'll send them an invitation. They can't come anyways. And they'll think that I'm really a good friend of theirs. You're not allowed to do that unless you tell them, because that's deception. And they may go out and even get a gift, which would be tantamount to theft, because you had no intention of inviting them, and so on and so forth. You're not allowed to deceive people and give them the wrong impression. This is a very important category, because we can't engage in a distortion of reality. That's beneath it. That's behind this whole thing. That man was granted the divine instrument, the soul, which has the ability to gain knowledge, to reason, and therefore it's so important that it not be distorted. The more you engage in lying, the more you lose any concept of truth. And anything that's appealing to you, subjective reality overcomes objective reality. We see the tremendous danger of this in these terrible, terrible protests that are going on. Not just the violence, the intimidation, but the distortion of truth. They refuse to accept. It's inconvenient to acknowledge what happened on October 7th and all of their flaws and defects. So they project it onto the Jews, the Israelis, and they accuse them of all types of terrible, terrible crimes, which really emanate from them. And that is a tragedy. We see the effects of this. That's what led to the Holocaust. Is it possible to imagine that all the lies that Hitler and Goebbels and the Nazis told about the Jews, there was not a shred of truth in anything? How could you get an entire nation to believe that the Jews are what they're describing them as? How could that? But you see that many people are simply vulnerable to that. They don't have the ability to use their own minds. They can't think independently. That's a vital capacity, the ability to reason, to think independently, not to be bullied by other people, to accept their version of reality. That's why Talmudic training is so important in our youth, because among other things, it gives them the ability to think for themselves, to learn how to reason, logic, and question and challenge, and they're permitted to challenge even the greatest rabbis. In Judaism, a rabbi cannot intimidate a student. To the contrary, he's to be praised for asking good questions, and if the rabbi doesn't have the answer, he's got to say, I don't know. Nobody has all the answers. No rabbi has all the answers, that knows everything there is to know about Judaism. There's no such thing. Even the greatest of our scholars, even Moses, there were things that he simply could not understand either. So that is the idea over here, why it's so important to preserve our intellectual integrity, our ability to reason, our ability to think for ourselves, and not to be bullied, and not to bully others. And we should be aware of that. Every time we engage in a deception, in a distortion of reality, even if it doesn't seem to be so big, because we got some benefit, we convinced somebody of something, even though it wasn't true, we are losing, we're harming ourselves, we're training our souls to become attached to things that are simply not true. And the capacity for man to use his mind, this is what differentiates us from the animal world. This is what we were created for, to gain knowledge of the world and to gain knowledge of the Creator.